Limbo was a unique game with a distinct visual style and a macabre tone that kept me engaged until its end. The controls were solid and the level design equally so, but after I finished one playthrough, I had no desire to revisit the game. I felt I had experienced all it had to offer and that it didn't do anything so special as to warrant further exploration. I can't say the same for Inside. I've completed four full playthroughs in less than 2 weeks, discovered all the light orbs, and unlocked the alternate ending. And when I finish this review, I'm going to turn it on again. Inside isn't a perfect game, but what it does well, it does better than most. It is both immersive and cinematic, not necessarily adjectives denoting positive praise when coming from me, but they're intended to be here. It's not cinematic in the way Call of Duty or an Assassin's Creed is. Those games separate the storytelling and gameplay, which detracts from them for me. Inside doesn't have cutscenes in a traditional sense. The couple of times you are forced to watch and not interact are because within the story of the game, you physically cannot interact in that moment. You play Inside as a small boy who slides down a rock surface into a wooded area. It becomes quickly evident that you do not belong here and that something unusual is going on. This is basically the same opening of Limbo, and the similarities don't stop there. But everything is more fleshed out here, from the art style to the gameplay design to the game engine. It is a beautiful and airy game where you never feel at ease. As I traveled further into the world, questions began to raise in my mind. Initially about the world itself and the technology and the experiments being conducted in the background. But my focus began to shift to my avatar. Questions like who exactly was he? Was he an escaped experiment? Was he attempting to thwart these experiments? Did he just stumble into this whole mess? Did he gain the abilities that he does throughout the game because of who he is? Or can anyone learn to mind control those lifeless automatons without the necessary equipment and breathe underwater? None of those questions are ever answered by the game. No questions are. That may beg some players, as it did me, but only a little. It helps to build the atmosphere, which is one of the game's major strengths. You travel through environments that are funhouse mirror versions of our own. There are farms with emaciated pigs, massive buildings that are completely empty of people but still furnished, and human shells marching through the streets and being loaded into box trucks. But why? Your guess is as good as mine. All this is backdrop for a puzzle platformer. None of the puzzles are overly challenging, and some are so simple that the solution avoided me. One of the final orbs is located behind a door that is operated by a button that is out of reach. You're supposed to use one of the propulsion cubes to open the door, and then use the cube again to close the door, but this time jump on top of the door before it closes, thus riding it into the hidden area. I tried for quite a while to steer the cube on top of the door by standing on the very right edge so that I could then use it again to jump into the exposed entryway. The game won't let you do that. But roadblocks like those fill the game, and figuring out the solution is immensely satisfying. The way the game plays with the background adds to the atmosphere and tension as well. If you only look into the right of the screen as you make your way across the world, not only will you miss excellent design detail, but cues as to what your next obstacle may be and how to possibly avoid it. There's junk in the foreground too, but it's just for aesthetics. I personally found it ingenious and kind of tricky to force the player to press the action button to interact with objects. Nothing you can move is in the same plane as your avatar. The first object you need to manipulate is a refrigerator. There is a wall too high to jump over, and you need to knock over the fridge and push it closer to the wall, and then climb on it and jump over. But you are forced to figure out on your own that you can manipulate it. There are no button prompts, and it isn't obstructing your path. It's just in the background, in the same screen as the wall. It's the first puzzle of the game, and from then on you know how to proceed with objects. It's just up to you to find them. Of course, this is almost immediately reinforced with the second puzzle. But this time, the object you need to proceed is a bit further away from the obstacle, and that's just great gameplay design. I can't stress enough what a satisfying time it was solving the game's puzzles or simply just maneuvering the world and existing in it. It feels great to control the main avatar, but you also get to control the automatons, a mini submarine, and eventually the huddle. I enjoyed controlling each, especially the huddle, a giant amorphous fleshy thing with limbs and torsos jutting out of its center mass. It is a horrific sight and doesn't sound much better as the individual bodies that make up the mass moan, and the sound of wet flesh slapping the ground and lumbers through offices and laboratories are a constant once it escapes its confinement tank. Since I just mentioned the sounds of the huddle, the sound design of this game overall is another area it shines. The footsteps, machinery, dogs barking, tires rolling on asphalt, it all brings the experience further to life. Then the sparse ambient soundtrack tops it all off. The production of this game, despite being a smaller indie title, is top-notch. Inside has very quickly become my third favorite game of this console generation, falling behind only Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Splatoon 2, but it has Splatoon 2 squarely in its sight. I'm only saying this because now it's time for the fun part, the negative criticism. A couple of the puzzles are tedious, and even more so on replays. Having to hide in the shadows and dart out to turn cranks before hiding again isn't fun, even if effectively tense. If you are spotted, you get tased to death, and your lifeless body gets dragged off the screen by the coiled wires fried by the bulky machinery in the background. I also thought the game was a little on the short side, and a bit too elusive on the details, admittedly not very big gripes. But my only other real complaint, and my biggest one, is the means by which you unlock the alternate ending. After you unlock the final light sphere, there is a board in the background with lights representing each of the spheres you've unlocked throughout the game. All but one of them go out, the one representing the second sphere, and you should have noticed a switch and a door you couldn't operate your first time through that area. So it's only logical to head back to the location of that sphere if you're paying attention to the background as the game has taught you to do. It doesn't hurt that your avatar turns to look at the board on your way to and from the last sphere either. But there is no possible way to walk back to the location of that sphere. You have to go to the menu, break the immersion, and load anywhere before you got to that point because the game prevents you from backtracking too far. I understand the decision to prevent backtracking, but in that case, the door to access the alternate ending should be somewhere you can backtrack to, if you choose to do so, and I would have. But after you get there, it's not as simple as pulling the switch. You have to play a tune. I haven't figured out if there is a way in-game to figure out the correct sequence to move the switch. One of my friends texted me the correct input. I was glad I got to see this ending without looking it up online. It would have been much more satisfying if I were able to figure it out on my own, and I'm honestly not sure if I could have. Anyway, I'm off to replay Inside.